Hey everyone, welcome back to a new video, and in this video we are going to write UI testing for our search recipe app. In our previous video we saw how to write unit testing. Now it's time to write UI testing. So in UI testing we test the user flow. So suppose user type anything into the query, or you can say search text field. Based on that it will show you the list of recipes, and when you click any of the item you will navigate to the recipe detail screen. So this is a complete user flow, and in this UI testing we're gonna verify all these things is working properly or not. In UI testing we need emulator, because how can you test UI without an emulator? It's not possible. So due to that reason we need an emulator. In unit testing we don't require an emulator because that test will execute into our JVM machine. So due to that reason this UI testing will resource expensive because of the use of this emulator. So without wasting any time, let's get started and write UI testing for our search recipe app. Now it's time to write our UI testing. So in order to write UI testing we require UI, and as you already know, in our recipe search app we have search feature, and this feature contains three different layers: data, domain and presentation. So this presentation layer contain all of the user interface. That means all of our UI testing will be present in the presentation layer. So let's create few test cases and see how we can write UI testing for this application. So here we are having search feature. Search feature contain the three layers as we have already discussed. This UI layer contains this package Kotlin plus Java, and we have three different packages within this. The first package is used to write our all of the actual code that we want to use, and the last package of this section will contain all of your unit testing. And in the middle we are having Android test package, and this package is actually used to write our UI testing. So let's begin with our UI testing. So first thing first, I'm gonna create a class and I will call this feature search UI testing, and within this class we are having a rule. So this rule is actually used to test the composables. So wall compose rule initialize with the help of create compose rule. Now here we are having two different way of creating compose rules. The first one is create compose rule, and the second one is create Android compose rule. So in this section we will discuss create compose rule. In the next section we will discuss create Android compose rule. So first let's begin with create compose rule. Simply press enter. Alright, so now it's time to initialize our use cases and create some fake repositories for this UI testing. So first thing first, I'm gonna use private let init variable get all recipe list use case. Second, I'm having the private let init variable get a recipe details use case. Third, I'm having the insert recipe use case. Next, I'm having the deletion. So delete recipe use case. And lastly, I'm having get all recipes from local DB use case. Alright, so we are having total 5 different use case, and now it's time to create the fake repository implementation. So for that, I'm gonna create a package naming, of course, repository, and within this repository, I'm gonna create a file naming fake repo. This is a file, and within this file, I'm having class. So the first one is fake success repo implementation. Okay, it will use search repository interface and simply implement all of this member. Before writing anything in the functions, let's create one more class. So this time I'm using fake failure repo implementation, and it uses again this search repository and implement all of its member. Now let's begin with the implementation. So before writing the implementation, we are having some fake data that we will use in order to write this UI testing. So for that, I'm going to create one more package and call this utils, and within this util, I'm going to create a file naming utils, and I will paste the data that I will use in the UI testing. Alright, so this is our data. So we have get recipe response which will return me list of recipes. Corresponding to that, we are having get recipe detail list which will return the recipe detail corresponding to these recipes. And in the bottom I'm having get recipe detail which eventually give me a recipe detail. Alright, so let's back with our fake repository, and here in the top function I'm gonna use a return keyword result.success and use get recipe response. And in the get recipe details I will use my get recipe detail list and find the meal which is equivalent to the ID that we pass through this function, and if it is not null, that means we receive the recipe details. And within this I'm going to use my result success and pass my recipe details. And if we don't have the meal, then on that scenario I'm using here a run block and simply return the result success, get recipe details. And lastly I'm going to use here return keyword. Now in order to fake this insert, delete and get all recipe function, I'm going to create here private while db flow and initialize this thing with mutable state flow empty list, and this list has a type of recipe. And just below to it I'm going to create a private while naming list, which is mutable list of again recipe. Okay, so when user inserts something, then I'm going to use here list add, simply add the recipe, and after that I'm having my db flow and update this value with the list. Similarly, in case of deletion, I'm going to use my list dot remove and remove the element, and ultimately in my db flow value I'm going to emit this list. Lastly, we are having get all recipes, so it's very easy, simply use a return db flow. This is the implementation of my fake success repository implementation. Now similarly we are having for the failure, so simply copy these two member variables, paste it over here. So in place of get recipe implementation, I'm going to use here return keyword result dot failure and pass a runtime exception that has some message. And I'm going to create a companion object, use here variable error message, and the error message would be error message, and I will use this particular variable over here. So this is for the failure. Similarly for this get recipe detail, I'm going to use a result failure and pass the runtime exception with the error message this. And insert, delete and get all recipes is pretty much same that we were doing over here. So simply copy these override functions and replace this thing. So yeah, we are pretty much done with our fake success repository implementation and fake failure repository implementation. And one more function I want to create within this fake implementation, reset. So in reset, I'm going to clear all the things that we are having in this list. Similarly, I'm having one more function over here naming a reset. And when we call this reset, again, I'm going to clear all the things that is present in my list. Okay, so come back to your feature search UI testing. And here I'm going to create private let init var fake success repository, and the type would be fake success repository implementation. Similarly, private let init variable fake failure repository, type would be fake failure repository implementation. And now I'm going to use my before block. So function setup, and in this setup I'm going to use my fake success repository and initialize this thing with fake success repository implementation. Similarly, we have fake failure repository, initialize this thing with fake failure repository implementation. And once we are done with our testing, I'm going to use this after block naming tear down and simply use fake success repository implementation reset and fake failure repository implementation reset. All right, so this is all for the initial setup. Now it's time to initialize my get all recipe list use case. I mean these use cases. So let's do that. So here we have two different things. The first one is the success state and the second one is failure state. So for that I'm going to create two different functions. So init success use case, and similarly we are having private fun init failure use case. So let's initialize all of our use cases over here. First one is get all recipe use case, which so this will be initialized from get all recipe use case, and the requirement is search repository. Because it is a success use case initialization, I'm gonna use here fake success repository. Okay, so this is for the get all recipe list use case, get recipe detail use case. So for this I'm gonna use here get, and here I'm gonna use my fake success repository. For the insertion, I'm gonna use here insert recipe use case and pass the fake success repository. For the deletion, I'm gonna use here delete recipe use case and pass your fake success repository. And lastly, get all recipes from local database. For this, I'm gonna use here get all recipes from local DB use case and pass my fake success repository. So this is for the success initialization. Simply copy this, paste it over here and replace this with fake failure repository. Copy this thing, change everywhere. Okay, so this is for the success initialization and this is for the failure initialization. We have completed all the data setup that we need in order to write UI testing. Now it's time to set up our UI testing environment so that we will write UI testing. So for that, I'm going to create a function naming testing environment, and within this testing environment I have few view models. So the first view model is a recipe list view model, and the initialize this view model with the help of recipe list view model, and the requirement is get all recipes. Similarly, we are having here a recipe details view model, initialize with the help of recipe details view model, and the requirement of this view model would be get recipe detail use case, delete and insert recipe use case. Last, we are having here favorite view model, and initialize with the help of favorite view model. A requirement of this is get all recipes from local DB use case and delete recipe use case. Now just below to it, I'm gonna use my compose rule. So here I'm having compose rule, and this compose rule have function set content. So I'm gonna set my content over here. So for that, I'm gonna use navhost. So requirement of this navhost is navhost controller. So I'm gonna create navhost controller first. Initialize this with remember nav controller and use this nav host controller here, and in place of graph I'm going to use start destination and open up the pair of parentheses. So within this pair of parentheses I will paste all of the things that we had in the navigation file. So in this navigation file we eventually created a navigation subgraph, and this subgraph contain all of this composable. So here I'm using nav host, and within this nav host I'm gonna paste all these things. So basically the composables, paste it over here, and in place of start destination, because I want to show the first screen as a recipe list screen, so due to that reason I'm gonna copy its route and paste it over here. Now I'm gonna remove all this view model and use my view model. So recipe list view model, copy this recipe list view model, paste it over here. Similarly for the detail one, a recipe detail view model, copy this thing, paste it here, here and here. Okay, remove this favorite one and use favorite view model. Remove this view model dot event with favorite view model dot on event. So this is our initial setup for the environment, or you can say UI testing environment. So yeah, we are pretty much done with testing environment. Let's begin with our first UI testing. In our first UI testing, we will verify if our backend will give us list of recipe. That means this list of recipe will be visible in our recipe list screen. So let's write test case for that. So in order to write test, we should use test annotation, and I'm gonna create a function, and I will call this recipe list success. And within this function, first thing first, I'm gonna initialize my use case. This is a success case, so I'm using here init success use case. And after that, I'm gonna set up my testing environment. Below to it, I'm having with scope function which use compose rule, and within this pair of parentheses, all of our assertion logic goes. So now the question is how we can identify our composable. Suppose we want to perform a click. So in order to perform click, we should verify the composable, on which composable we want to perform the operation. So here we are using test tag for that. Before understanding this test tag thing, let's recapitulate what is a composable. So when you write composable, this composable will eventually converted into tree data structure, and this tree data structure contain nodes. So eventually all of your composable will become node of a tree, and due to that reason here we are using on node with tag, on node with text. This is a reason. In XML we are using r.id. something, but here we are using test tag. So let's see what is test tag. So in order to use test tags, go to recipe list screen, and on the top I'm gonna create object, a recipe list screen test tag. Okay, so I'm gonna create here const while search. So this will eventually use for the search. Second, we are having our lazy column. So I'm using a lazy call and call this a lazy call. And lastly, we are having const val for our floating action button. And I will call this FAB. Alright, so now it's time to use this test tag. So here, if we scroll down, in the scaffold, we are having our floating action button. So let's add modifier here. And this modifier has an extension test tag. You can use this test tag and use the tag which you want to use over here. So here I will use floating action button. Similarly, we are having text field, and on the bottom we are having modifier, use test tag, recipe list screen test tag, simply use search. And on the bottom we are having our lazy columns. So here I'm gonna use test tag, recipe list screen test tag, lazy call. Okay. Now I want to verify this item. So in order to verify this item, we should require test tag. So I'm gonna use some different approach here in order to render these items. So instead of using items, I'm gonna use the item indexed. Okay, pass your list, and within this pair of parentheses, we are going to receive index and item. Simply remove this part, and you are having this item indexed that will eventually render your list item one by one, and this thing contain index 2. So let's use this index. So in our card, I'm gonna use test tag, pass my recipe str meal name, and simply add this index so that it become a unique test tag. Now we are done with our test tag things. Go to your feature search UI testing, and here I will write my logic or the assertion. So for that, I'm going to use here on node with tag, use my recipe list screen test tag dot search. Okay, perform the click. So first I'm going to perform click onto this search, and after that I'm going to use on node with tag, again the search one, and this time I'm going to perform text input chicken. So this become query. Now if we write query, that means our backend will respond successfully. After this line we are having lazy column. So on node with tag, recipe test tag lazy call, I mean this must be visible. That means if it is visible, our assertion will true. If it is not, then our test case will fail. Okay, so once it is visible, that means our children, or you can say list item, is also visible. So let's test it out. So on node with tag, recipe list screen test tag lazy column, and here we are having on child at. So on child at 0, I'm gonna write some assertion. So for that I will use assert has test tag. Okay, so when you open this recipe list screen, here you can see I have make test tag for this. So this is a dynamic test tag. So in order to create this test tag in my UI testing, I'm gonna use get recipe response dot its first item, and I will grab its meal name and simply add the index. Okay, now execute this test case. Alright, so UI testing require an emulator to run, and due to this reason, most of the companies will avoid to write UI testing because it's more resource expensive, and if you are using Fire-based test lab, then it will cost you a lot. And due to that reason, most of the people will only use unit testing. They don't write UI testing. But the thing is, you should know as a developer. Okay, so our test case will pass successfully. You can see over here. Now it's time to write the second test case. So I'm gonna write second test case for the failure. So test function, test recipe list failure, and within this I'm gonna this time initialize my use case with the help of init failure use case. Set up my testing environment, and I'm gonna use here with scope function, pass my compose rule, and within this block I will put all of the logic for the testing. So these two things are same, so simply paste it over here. And after that, if you open up my fake repository, so in the failure I'm using error message. So I'm gonna simply copy this error message, because when our backend will throw an exception, this is a message that I'm gonna receive, and this message will eventually show up to the user on the screen. So let's verify on node with text. Okay, pass your error message, import it, and check whether it is displayed or not. Alright, so execute this test case. Alright, so here you can see our test case will pass successfully. Alright, so let's write another test case. So in this test case, we're gonna verify the recipe detail screen. So for that, I'm gonna write this recipe list success, recipe detail success. And within this, I'm gonna use init success use case testing environment so that our environment will be set up correctly. And after that, I'm going to use with scope function with compose rule, and similarly I'm using the same things. So first I'm going to perform click and perform the text input. After that, I'm going to verify these two things. All right, so once our test case will pass up to this line, then the next line I'm going to use on node with tag, and the tag is same. So the tag is present over here. I'm going to grab this thing, paste it over here, and perform a click. Okay, so once we perform click, we will eventually land into the recipe detail screen. So for that, I'm going to use here wait for ideal, and after that I will verify on node with tag get recipe response dot first dot strmil. If this thing is up here, that means yes, our test case will pass successfully. So in this test case, we will first fetch the data from backend in recipe list screen, and when user click any of the item, we will move on to our recipe detail screen. So this test will eventually test that logic. Alright, so our test case will fail, and the reason of failure is permission denied, missing internet permission. So I don't know why it is happening. So in order to fix this, go to your manifest and here use the permission internet. Alright, and after that I'm gonna execute this test case again. Alright, so yeah, our test case will pass successfully. Now it's time to write the test case for the insertion. So for that, I'm using the same thing because it's pretty much same. We will perform the click onto the search, then we will write the query, and eventually it will give back the list of recipes. We click any of the item, go to the details, and in the details we are having two options. Either we can insert this recipe detail into my database, or we should delete it. So before writing this test insertion, you should go into your recipe detail screen, and on the top I'm gonna create test tag. So for that, I'm having here object recipe detail screen test tag. Okay, so first thing first, I'm gonna use here insert one. So this insert will eventually use into the top bar actions. Second, we are having delete. All right, so last we are having arrow back. Okay, now it's time to use these test tags. So when you scroll down in the scaffold, we are having top bar. So this top bar having text. Okay, and on the bottom we are having actions. So this action contain two different button. Icon button this, which is eventually used to insert the recipe detail into my database, and second one is our delete button. So this eventually used to delete the item from our database. So I'm going to use modifier here and add the test tag, which is coming from my recipe detail test tag. This is for the insertion. Simply copy this line of code from here and paste it over here, and this time we are having delete. And in the icon, I'm gonna use test tag. So here I'm using test tag, and this time we are having a recipe detail screen test tag arrow back. Okay, so these are three things that I will use in this recipe detail screen. Go back to your UI testing, and let's begin with our insertion testing. So first thing first, this is a success case, so I'm going to use init success use case, set up my testing environment, and I'm going to use here with scope function and pass my composable rule. All right, so I'm gonna grab few lines of code from this testing because it's pretty much same. So first I will perform the click, then perform the text input, then we will check if a lazy column is displayed or not, and after that I will check the list item first, and if it is displayed, that means I will perform the click. So I'm gonna copy this thing and paste it over here. It's pretty much same. And after that, I'm going to use here on node with tag recipe detail test tag. We are having insert and simply perform a click. And after that, I'm going to use on node with tag recipe list screen test tag arrow back. So I'm using here recipe list screen. So instead of this, I'm going to use here recipe detail screen test tag arrow back. Okay, perform click. So by doing this, we first perform query, then perform a click operation into our first recipe list item, go to our recipe detail screen, press the insert, or you can say press the star icon button, which eventually insert this item into our database. Okay, once this item goes into our database, we should come back to our responsibility screen, click onto the floating action button, and we will navigate to the favorite screen. And if the insertion is correct, that means we are going to see a item into my favorite screen. So this is a logic, this is a user flow. Okay, so here I'm gonna press arrow back, that means we will again come back to our respiratory screen. And now I'm gonna use on node with tag a respiratory screen test tag. We are having floating action button, and I'm gonna perform the click. Okay, and now it's time to verify whether this item is present into my favorite screen or not. All right, so in order to do that, I'm gonna use here on node with text get recipe response its first item str mail. If it is displayed, that means yeah, it is inserted successfully. And I'm going to use here wait for idea so that everything goes well. Execute this test case. Alright, so you can see our test case will pass successfully. Now it's time to perform the deletion. Deletion is pretty much same, so I'm gonna reuse this code. So test function test delete. Okay, so I'm gonna grab all these things, so up to this place, because if you want to delete something, at least you are having something in your database. So up to this place we are having one item into our database. Now it's time to delete. So in order to delete an item, you should go into your favorite screen. Okay, so in your favorite screen we should create few test tag, because we are going to perform some operation, and if you want to perform some operation, you have test tags. So object, I'm going to call this favorite screen test tag. So const well, the first one is a lazy column, so I'm going to use, so first one is our lazy column, second is our drop down. So this drop down is eventually used for the sorting, so I'm going to call this drop underscore down. Next we are having alphabetical sort, next less ingredient sort, and lastly we are having a reset sort. Alright, so now it's time to use this test tag in our favorite screen. So when you scroll down, you are going to see this top app bar, and this top app bar contain an icon button. So in the icon button, I'm going to use modifier test tag and use my favorite screen test tag, the first one, which is a drop down. Okay, when you scroll down a little bit, we are having a drop down menu, and this drop down menu contain drop down menu items. So this menu item is used for the alphabetical sort. So for that, I'm going to use here modifier test tag favorite screen test tag the alphabetical. Okay, similarly this one is used for the list ingredient sort. So modifier test tag favorite screen test tag less ingredient. And similarly we are having here the last one, which is a reset. So I'm going to use modifier test tag favorite screen test tag and reset. So these are the test tags which we will use in the favorite screen. And when you scroll down the bottom, if our database is empty, then user are going to see this nothing found message on the screen. And once we are having something in our database, that means we are going to see this lazy column. So I'm going to use here test tag and pass the favorite screen test tag lazy call. And now I'm going to modify this item with items index. Okay, I'm going to pass my list, and within this I'm going to receive the index and item. Remove this thing. Now in your card we are having here icon button. So this icon button is eventually used to delete an item. So for that I'm going to use modifier test tag, and I'm using the same approach that we had seen. So it dot str meal dot plus its index. Okay, so now it's time to perform the deletion, but we are already having this modifier. So instead of creating a new modifier, I'm gonna cut this thing out and paste it over here and remove this modifier. Now go back to your feature search UI testing, and here if our item will be inserted successfully in the database, that means we are having one item in the favorite screen. Now it's time to delete that item. So to do that, I'm going to use here on node with tag get recipe response dot first dot str mail dot plus and pass the first element, which is 0. Perform click. So eventually it will delete that item from the database. And lastly I'm gonna see on node with text, and this text will coming from our this part, because our list is empty, and on that scenario user are going to see this nothing found message. So simply use this thing and check whether it is visible to our user or not. Execute this test case. Alright, so our test case fail, and the reason of this test failure is in our fake repository I have not converted this thing into list, so just do it. Okay, similarly for the failure fake repository, to list and here to list. Now go back to your UI testing again and execute this test case. Alright, so our test case will pass successfully. So we have done with our insertion and deletion logic. So let's write another test case. So this test case is used to test the sorting logic. But before writing this test case, go to your favorite screen, and in the favorite screen, if you check out this icon button that is used for delete our recipe. So here I'm using test tag, and this test tag is a dynamic test tag which eventually generate from our meal name. So instead of this, I'm gonna cut this test tag from here and paste in the card. Okay, and on the top I'm gonna create one more const val for delete, and I'm gonna use this delete into my icon button. So here it is, and in the modifier I'm gonna use test tag delete. Import this delete. Make sure this delete is coming from your favorite screen. Alright, come back to your UI testing, and here in the delete test case, now it's time to remove this thing with delete, and this delete is coming from your favorite screen test tag. Alright, so now execute this test case. Alright, so our test case passed successfully. Now let's write another test case for our sorting. So in the sorting we are having alphabetical. So in alphabetical sort, first thing first, I'm gonna use the success use case, and after that I'm gonna set up my environment. I'm gonna use with scope function, and within this I'm gonna use on node with text, and this is coming from my recipe list screen test tag, and we are having search. Simply perform click, and after that I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe list screen test tag dot search, and I'm gonna perform the text input which is chicken. All right, after that I'm gonna use on node with text coming up from my recipe list screen test tag our lazy column on child at 0. I'm gonna perform the click. So this will eventually navigate me to the recipe detail screen, and in my recipe detail screen I'm gonna use on node with tag. We are having a recipe detail screen test tag insert, and simply perform click. So it will eventually insert this recipe into our database. After that I'm gonna use on node with tag which is coming from my recipe list screen test tag that has lazy column, and I'm gonna perform this scroll. So I will use perform scroll to node, and within this I'm gonna use head test tag, and I'm gonna use my get recipe response dot last. Basically in my get recipe response I have only two recipes. Okay, so if I'm using the last, eventually it will give me this element. This last has str meal name, and I'm gonna add the index which is first. So it will eventually scroll down to up to this item, and I'm gonna use again on node with tag recipe list screen test tag lazy column, and I'm gonna use its on child at first. Perform click. So it will eventually navigate me to recipe detail screen, and in my recipe detail screen again I'm gonna use a recipe detail screen test tag. Within this we are having insert, and simply perform click. After that you will use a recipe detail screen test tag arrow back and perform click. So again you are coming back to the recipe list screen, and now I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe list screen test tag that contain floating action button. Perform click. So now you are going to the favorite screen, and in the favorite screen we are having the drop down test tag. So I'm gonna use that. So on node with tag, and this time I'm gonna use favorite screen test tag that contain drop down. Simply perform click, it will open up the drop down, and within this we are having the alphabetical sort. So in order to click alphabetical sort I'm gonna use here on node with tag. We are having favorite screen test tag that contain the alphabetical. Simply perform click, and if you open up the get recipe response, so the first element will be chicken and the second element is kadai paneer. That means if you sort your list based on the alphabet, then it will use the same list because C comes before the K. So due to that reason, go to this UI testing and just use on node with tag, and within this favorite screen test tag we are having lazy call. Okay, and this lazy call has a child at 0, and I believe this has test tag get recipe response dot first dot strmail dot plus the index which is 0. Okay, and similarly on the second item we are having the last item from this recipe response, and instead of 0 this time index will be 1. Change this index. Now execute this test case. Alright, so our test case passed successfully. Now it's time to write the another test case for our second sorting technique, which is list ingredient. But before writing any test case, you should open up this get recipe response, and with this response, if you notice the instructions, so 1 to 3, that means the kadai paneer has length 3 and the chicken will have 1 2 3 4 5. That means if we sorting our list based on the list ingredient, that means our kadhai paneer will rank on the top of the list. So let's write another test case for this. So use test name function test list ingredient, and within this I'm gonna copy paste these things because it's pretty much same. So copy this thing, paste it over here. Alright, so I have copied the code from my previous test case, and here I'm using alphabetical sort. So instead of using alphabetical sort, I'm gonna use list ingredient. And this time my first element of the lazy column will be kadhai paneer. So use last here, and last item of my lazy column will become the chicken. So use first here. Now simply execute this test case. Alright, so our test case passed successfully. Now it's time to write the another test case for the reset. So in order to use the reset, I'm gonna create a test case naming fun test reset sort. And within this, I'm gonna copy the code that we were using for our previous test case because it's pretty much same. So simply copy this thing and paste it over here. Now up to this place everything works well. So our first element will become kadhai paneer, and second element of our lazy column is chicken. Now it's time to reset the order. So in order to reset the order, I'm gonna use here on node with tag. This is coming from my favorite screen test tag that contain drop down. I'm gonna simply perform the click. After that we are having on node with tag. Again this time I'm gonna use favorite screen test tag that contain reset. Perform the click. Now the order become reverse because originally the list is chicken and kadhai paneer. When we are using less ingredient, on that occasion this list got reversed. Now when we use a reset again, that means this will become the original list. So in original list we are having first chicken and lastly the kadhai paneer. So let's verify this. Alright, so our test case passed successfully, and we are having one more test case. So suppose if user click any of the recipe item within our favorite screen, then we are going to see its detail. So in order to write test case for that, I'm gonna use here test function test recipe details from favorite. So first thing first, I'm gonna initialize my success use case, then set up my testing environment, and I'm gonna use here with scope function with compose rule. Within this, I'm gonna use on node with tag, and this time I will use a respiratory screen test tag search. Okay, simply perform click, and after that I'm gonna perform the query, which is again chicken. After that, I'm gonna use on node with tag coming from my recipe list screen test tag lazy column on child at 0. I'm gonna perform click, and when we perform click we eventually navigate to the detail screen, and from where I'm gonna use on node with tag a recipe detail screen test tag that has insert, and I will perform the click. After that I'm gonna use on node with tag a recipe detail test tag. We are having arrow back, perform the click. Now we are eventually coming back to our recipe list. Again use on node with tag, recipe list screen test tag, floating action button, perform the click. So eventually you are standing on the favorite screen, and in the favorite screen I'm gonna use on node with tag, favorite screen test tag. We are having lazy column, and within this lazy column we are having on child at 0. Okay, I'm asserting has test tag, and this test tag is eventually coming from my get recipe response dot first dot str mail dot plus 0. Simply perform click. Now it will eventually navigate you to detail screen, and in that detail screen I'm gonna verify a text. So on node with text, get recipe response dot first dot str mail assert is displayed. Simply execute this test case. Alright, so our test case will pass successfully. So we have seen the deletion logic. So in deletion logic, we use favorite screen to delete any item. Similarly, we are having one more delete option which is present in my recipe detail screen. So let's write test case for that. So for that, I'm going to use here test delete from recipe details. Okay, so first thing first, again init success use case, set up my environment with compose rule. Alright, so within this compose rule, again I'm gonna use on node with tag. The tag is coming from my recipe screen test tag search. Perform the click, and after that I'm gonna duplicate it and perform the text input which is chicken. On node with tag. Now I'm gonna use my recipe list screen test tag lazy column on child at 0. I'm gonna perform the click. Alright, so once we perform the click, we eventually navigate to the detail screen, and in the detail screen I'm gonna use on node with tag. This tag is coming from my recipe detail screen test tag dot insert. Simply perform click, and after that I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe detail screen test tag arrow back, perform click. So eventually we come back to our recipe list screen. Now use on node with tag, use a recipe list screen test tag floating action button, perform click. You eventually go into the favorite screen, and in our favorite screen I'm gonna verify on node with tag favorite screen test tag that has lazy column. So on child at 0 I'm gonna check assert has test tag get recipe response dot first dot str mail plus the index which is 0. If it is there, that means yes, we successfully insert that item. So now I'm gonna press the back button. So in order to press the back button, we should use espresso. So in order to use espresso, go to your Gradle scripts, and here we are having UI layer build.gradle.kts, and I'm gonna use Android test implementation lips.espresso. Simply sync your project and come back to your feature search UI testing. And here I'm gonna use espresso press pack. So this is coming from espresso. So espresso will provide you a lot of functions like this. You can use that functions into your UI testing. Okay, so this will eventually press the back button. That means we again come back to our recipe list screen. Now I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe list screen test tag that has a lazy column, and on child at 0 I'm gonna perform the click, and after that I'm presenting in my recipe detail screen where I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe detail screen test tag that has delete, and I'm gonna perform the click. After that I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe detail screen test tag, press the arrow back. So eventually again I will land into my recipe list screen, and now I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe list screen test tag floating action button and perform the click. And once we open my favorite screen, that means we are going to see nothing. So in order to verify, I'm gonna use on node with text and use nothing found text into the screen, and I'm gonna assert this thing. Okay, so execute this test case again. Alright, so our test case passed successfully. So now it's time to run all the test case at once, so that if there any problem occurs, we will fix that. So let's go up to this class name, and in front of this class name you are going to see these two buttons. Simply press, so it will eventually execute all of your test case at once. So all of our UI testing will pass successfully. So this is our first approach, and in this approach we are going to create our use cases, our repository manually. In the next section we are going to see how to use create Android compose rule, how to use a main activity, and after using these things how to write this UI testing. Okay, and apart from this, on that section we are going to discuss how to use Dagger Hilt in your UI testing. But the thing is, this approach is the very good approach, because by using this approach you can test your all the states that your screen are having. But if you are using Dagger Hilt, it is not possible somehow. Go to your app module, because your app module contains main activity, and open up this package, and within our Android test I'm gonna create a class which is feature search UI testing. Okay, and within this class I'm gonna create rule wall compose a rule, and this time I'm gonna use create Android compose rule main activity. And now I'm gonna use Dagger Hilt here. So in order to use Dagger Hilt you should add dependency first. So let me minimize this thing, go to your app module build.rel.kts, and here I'm gonna add a dependency. So first one is our Android test implementation, and within this I'm going to use ellipse Dagger Hilt testing. And similarly here I'm having the second dependency, which is for espresso, that we had already used. Simply sync your project. Alright, so within this build Gradle KTS, go to the top, and here you are going to see test implementation runner. So this will eventually run your UI tests. But now we are going to use Dagger Hilt, so we should replace this Android JUnit runner with our custom Dagger runner. So in order to do that, first thing first, go to this package and create a class, and this class name would be Dagger Runner. This is a class, and this class will eventually extend Android JUnit runner, and within this we are having new application. So just change this new application class name Hilt test application class java.name. Alright, so register this Dagger runner. So in order to register this Dagger runner, simply copy up this package name, go to your build.gradle.kts and remove this thing with your package name, and lastly use Hilt runner. So not Hilt runner, it's actually Dagger runner. Simply sync your project. Let's create few test case. So first I'm gonna use here test recipe list success. We don't need to set up all of our use cases by ourselves, because that thing will be handled to our Dagger Hilt, and Dagger Hilt will eventually create and inject. So here I'm gonna write few test cases. So for that I'm gonna use with compose rule on node with tag. This tag is the same tag which is coming from my recipe list screen test tag search. Perform click, and after that you're gonna perform the text input, which is chicken. So this is our query. So on node with tag, a recipe list screen test tag, we are having our lazy column and all child at 0. I'm gonna assert whether our test tag, which is coming from our get recipe response. So this get recipe response is not accessible, because this is present in my search feature Android test. So in our search feature we are having UI layer, and this UI layer contain this Android test, so this is not accessible. So what I'm going to do over here, I'm going to copy this util package and paste it here. Open up this util package and change this package name. Alright, so come back to your feature search UI testing, and now I'm going to use get recipe response dot first dot its mail name, and lastly I'm gonna plus the index name. Alright, so now I'm gonna execute this thing. Alright, so my test case will fail, and the reason of the test failing is the component was not created. Check that you have added the Hilt Android rule. So what is the problem over here? So the thing is, we eventually set up our runner, but we don't set up our Dagger Hilt for this test case. So how can we do that? So in order to do that, you should use annotation Hilt Android test. And now just below to it, we are having our Hilt rule, wall, Hilt rule, Hilt Android rule, pass your test instance. And in this setup, so basically in the before block, we are having function name setup, and within this I'm going to use hilt rule dot inject, and I'm going to use order here. So this order is 1 and this order is second for the compose rule. Now when you execute this test case, alright, so our test case will fail, and the reason of the failure is by default we are using the production level code, the production level dependency into this test case. Now the problem here is, in our production level code we are using a repository that eventually call the backend, and backend will give us the response. But if you are doing that thing in the UI testing, that would be wrong, because sometimes your internet may be down, sometimes it works, sometimes it won't, and due to that reason your test case will eventually fail sometimes, and sometime it will pass. So instead of using the production level repository, I'm gonna create a fake repository and use that fake repository in this particular testing. So how can we do that? So in order to do that, I'm gonna create a fake repository. So I'm gonna create a package within my search recipe app package, which is called di, and within this di I'm gonna create an object, and the object name is let's say test di. All right, so in order to create a module for testing, I'm going to use here test installing, and here you should pass the component. So the in component you guys pass this singleton component, because all of our module will use singleton. And second is our replaces, so which module you are going to replace with this test di module. So for me, I'm gonna replace the search data module, because search data module will eventually provide us the repository implementation. This is a module, so use module over here. Okay, so now it's time to create a fake repository. So in order to create fake repository, I'm going to create one more package naming repository, and within this repository I'm going to create my fake class. So fake search repository, this is the class, and this class uses search repository implementation. Just press Ctrl I and implement all the members. All right, so the requirement of this repository would be recipe DAO. All right, so in place of get recipes, I'm gonna use here my result.success get recipe response, and in the place of recipe detail, I'm gonna use the same technique that we were using in my search feature UI testing. So for that, I'm gonna simply use this repository. So this in this repository we are having the logic. So simply grab this thing, come back to your fake repository and paste it. Okay, so import this get recipe list, and here remove this thing. All right, so this is our get recipe detail logic. Use a return keyword just before to this result, and in place of insert recipe, I'm going to use my recipe data access object. So recipe data access object dot insert recipe, pass your recipe, and in place of delete recipe to do, I'm going to use recipe dot delete recipe, pass your recipe. Similarly, in the place of get all recipe to do, I'm going to use a return recipe dot get all recipes. Alright, so now it's time to provide the implementation of our search repository with this fake search repository. So for that, go to your test di, and here I'm gonna use provide function. So first thing first, I wanna provide my database. So for that, requirement is context, and this will eventually return me app database. Use return room dot in memory database builder. So this database builder will use for the testing. Pass your context app database class dot java and simply build it, and make sure this is a singleton. Similarly, I'm gonna use here provide function, which eventually provide me the recipe data access object, and the requirement of this function would be app database and return recipe data access object. So return app database dot get recipe DAO. Now it's time to provide my repository. So function provide a repository implementation, and the return type would be the search repository. Return your fake search repository, and the requirement of this would be recipe DAO. So you can pass this recipe DAO from this function. All right, so now we are going to replace our search data module with this testing di module. Okay, go back to your feature search UI testing, and on the top we are going to use uninstall modules, and when you press Ctrl P you are going to see the classes. So here you can pass the object that you are going to replace. So I'm gonna replace my search data module entirely. Now if you execute this test case, it will use your fake search repository instead of the actual repository implementation that you have written for your production code. So let's give a run. So here what we are doing wrong is, so in our test DI, we are going to provide two things, app database and recipe data access object, and these two things are already provided in my app module. So when you open this app module, here you can see we actually already provided these two things. So in order to tackle this problem, I'm gonna create one more module. So install in singleton component dot class. So this is a module. I'm gonna use here object naming database module, and I'm gonna grab these two things, paste it over here. Now I will uninstall this module in my testing. So on the top I'm gonna uninstall my database module dot class, import this database module, and on your testing DI I'm gonna replace singleton component database module with this test DI. Now go back to your feature search UI testing and execute it. Alright, as you can see, our test case will pass successfully. So by using this approach, you can write test cases. But the thing is, with this approach, you are not able to test the error case. If your search repository or fake search repository will return a success response, that means you are only able to test the success cases. If your repository will return the error response, then it will only able to test your error cases. But if you are to test everything at one repository, it is not possible, and due to that reason this approach is not working well for all of your state testing. How can we write test cases which will eventually test all of our states? Let's see how we can write that test cases. So in order to write that test cases, I'm gonna create one more class, and this time I'm gonna call this feature search UI testing all case. So this is a class, and within this class I'm gonna use few things. So the first thing is same, so go over feature search UI testing, and on the top I'm gonna grab these things. So simply copy this thing, come back, paste on the top, and again go in your feature search UI testing, grab these things and come back over here. All right, so in order to test all of your states that your screen are having, you should use the same code that we were writing feature search UI Android testing. So here I'm gonna grab all these things, so from this up to end, copy this thing, come back to my feature search UI testing all case and simply paste it. All right, so import this get recipe response, go to the top. So now error message is not available here. So in order to use this error message, I'm gonna use the same repository that we were using for writing these test cases, which is present over here. Okay, so I'm gonna copy all this stuff from top to bottom, copy it, go back to the top, and in the repository I'm gonna create a file naming fake repository for all case, simply paste it. And now it's time to import these functions. So we are having here get recipe detail list, and remove this get recipe detail and use again get recipe details. Alright, so go to the top and simply reformat it by pressing Ctrl Alt L. Okay, go to your feature search UI testing for all case and now import this error message. Alright, so everything is fine over here. Now go to the top and you should import this to fake repository implementation. Okay, and in your testing environment, so here in our compose rule we are using set content, but if you are using create android compose rule, then this will give you an problem. So in order to avoid the problem, you should use its activity set content. Now it will work as we expected, as we have already done in our search feature UI layer testing. So let's give a run. As you can see, our test case will start executing. Alright, so all of our test case is passed successfully. There must be a question pops up into your mind, and the question is, why are you using this Hilt Android test and uninstall modules if you are not using this dependency into your test case? So the answer of this is because in our main activity we are using Android entry point, and in order to execute this activity properly, we should set up all this dependency injection thing for our testing. So yeah, by using this approach, you are actually testing all of your states properly. Okay. Now come back to our second feature search UI testing class, and within this class, you should create more test case. So let's do that. So I'm gonna write one more test case function test. So from a recipe list success, I'm gonna move to a recipe detail success, and I'm gonna use a with composable rule and on node with tag. A recipe screen test tag we are having here search, simply perform the click. Similarly, we are having on node with text recipe screen test tag dot search, perform the text input, and query would be chicken. Okay, and after that I'm gonna use on node with tag recipe screen dot lazy column on child at 0. I'm gonna assert hash test tag get recipe response dot first dot str mail plus the index which is 0, and after that I'm going to perform click. Okay, so once we perform click, we are going to navigate to our recipe detail screen, and where I'm assuming I'm going to see the get recipe response dot its first item str mail assert is displayed. Execute this. Alright, so our test case passed successfully. Now thing is, you can write your test cases by this approach also, and it will work, but the thing is you are not able to write test cases for all of the states that you are having for your screen. So yeah, in this video we are discussing three different sections. In the first section we talked about how to test our search feature with the approach where so our test case passed successfully. In this video, we have seen three different approaches of writing UI testing. So in the first approach, we have initialized our use cases by ourselves. Depending on our need, we will initialize our use case with success and failure states. And after that, we are going to write the UI testing for that. So that approach is usually a very good approach because you can test all of your states by using that approach. Second approach we have discussed over here, which is this one, feature search UI testing, and in this testing I'm using Dagger Hilt and this create Android compose rule. By using this technique you can perform the UI testing, but the thing is it is not reliable because you are not able to test all of the states of your screens. As you can see over here, we can replace our fake search repository with a single repository that contain the success events only, and when you replace this repository, then in your testing you are only able to test the success case, not the error, not the ideal, or not the zero states. So this is a problem that you are facing with this approach. The last approach in which we are using feature search UI testing all case, and here I'm using create Android compose rule. Okay, by using this approach you can perform the UI testing, and by using this approach you can also write or test all of the states that you are having on the screen. So this is also a very good approach. So this approach commonly used when you are having something which require context. So on that scenario you can use this create Android compose rule, because in compose rule we are having activity over here, and by using this activity you can create its context and use it in your test cases. So this is a plus point of this. And when you are using create Android compose rule, make sure when you are setting up your environment you should use compose rule dot activity. If you are not using this activity, then eventually it will give you an error. So yeah, these are three techniques that I had told you, and I believe this is a very good video for you to understand UI testing and also the different approaches to write your UI testing. All right, so we are done with this video, and in that video we saw a lot of things. We saw different approaches of writing UI testing. We saw how to use Dagger Hilt. We saw how to use a room database in memory database builder to test a room database, and also we saw how to use create Android compose rule, create compose rule. And I hope you like this video. If you like this video, please write some comments, and you should buy me a coffee. Link is present in the description box. So this is a new thing that I start doing in my YouTube. All right, so that's it for this video. Bye bye.